Hello and welcome to Volcano Bakemeat Episode 2, Storytelling. We are going to take a moment to talk about storytelling in gaming, why that matters, and how we get to a story that actually really works, or doesn't. Due to the nature of this episode, we apologize for any spoilers. We're going to try to be good and take notes as to what we might be spoiling for people and putting that in the show notes, so on.
So check that before you listen to this.
Definitely a good
If you haven't checked it yet, stop now. Look at them right now.
Yeah, pause it. We'll wait. Alright, good? We good? Okay. Alright, so, to introduce, my name is Jessica.
I'm Paige.
I'm Jeff.
I am Connor.
And I'm Grant.
And we're going to start by asking, guys, what was the most notable game story that affected you emotionally? What touched your hearts?
Oh,
made
man.
you weep? Made you scared?
I can go with spoilers straight out of the
Made you
gate.
laugh?
That we can...
Twilight, honey.
Yeah, Dragon Age Inquisition.
Oh, yeah.
A midway point...
I'm sorry, I wanted to do one more flamboyant voice. I apologize.
At a midway point in the game, after your group has suffered a major defeat, the entire group comes together, just the peoples of the kingdom. They're downtrodden, they're distraught, they barely made it out alive. And the head of the chantry, an old nun-type lady, starts singing one of the hymns of their people about how dawn will come, and this is a dark time, but there will be light. And she starts singing, and then some of your party starts singing, and then the entire crowd is singing, and, I'm sitting there weeping uncontrollably. And this is, by itself, it was a very emotional moment in the game. But the thing is that now, if I go and watch that scene on YouTube, as I occasionally do, I will still weep uncontrollably. Partially because it was very emotional.
moment.
It was an emotional moment in the game, and also, I watched it, I was playing it at a time where I really hated my job, so they've become inexplicably intertwined, and so I just, cry knowing that I hated my job and that I got out of it, but also because, they came together as a people, and they survived, and they thrived, darn it, and they're so strong. This is the same reason I cry at the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt soundtrack, the opening theme, which is an auto-tune news song, and I am not ashamed.
Hey, that's fair. That's what gets you. That's what gets you.
You do you. You cry at the stuff that makes you cry.
Jeff?
I'm trying to think. There are a couple of ones which stick out. Of course, Telltale's The Walking Dead is one of the big ones. All the Mass Effect games had moments. Probably the one which really sticks out for me the most as an emotional response is in Baldur's Gate 2. I played this when I was still pretty young and hadn't been exposed to that much stuff yet. It was one of the first more mature-oriented games that I played, and there is a moment where the villain captures one of your party members and ends up conducting rather twisted and awful experiments on her. It's a game from, I believe it's 99, and it's just a little top-down view of him throwing little bolts of lightning, and it doesn't really make any sense, but you know what's happening. And I remember watching that and thinking, my God, what's going on here? I don't understand. This isn't okay. I need to fix this. And that, for me, was the first time that a game really got an emotional rise out of me that I specifically remember, because it was something I had never quite felt before. Connor, how about you, man?
This is a really interesting question, actually, because what I'm going to go with for this is something that's been happening to me for a lot of games I've been playing across my life. And actually, Grant and I have talked about this, but it's when I get hit emotionally by a game, it's to the point where I finish it, or I finish a certain point where the emotional hit happens, and I feel very uncomfortable. I feel unsettled. I can't play it for a while, or anything else for a while after that. And many games have done that for me. I think, though, what I'm going to go with for one of the most notable early on was probably the first Bioshock. Just because I had played a bunch of games before that, but Bioshock was really the first game I had played where the narrative was just so intensive to me, and I mean, I'm going to spoil it in case any of you guys want to stop me. but
If people
Well,
haven't played it by now, they're probably not going to.
I figured.
And
But
it's-
with the first,
Yeah.
well, in the first Bioshock, the whole point is you crash land in the ocean, you end up in Rapture, you're fighting to help Atlas to overthrow Andrew Ryan and his whole regime, and just there's a part, the climax in the middle of that game was just mind blowing, in the sense that you meet Andrew Ryan, and right before that, it's revealed that everything you've been doing has been a result of mind control, and you just responding to a trigger, and it was like, what? And it's one of those things where like you didn't even realize it, and as soon as they drop that point, you look back at the entire story behind the game, and you realize every single point has just been a result of you responding to a trigger. And it was like, what? And then you go in, and Andrew Ryan forces you to kill him with the fucking golf club.
Using the same trigger.
Using the same trigger, and it was just like, it shocked me. It honestly did. It shocked me. I was like, oh my god! I had to stop playing for days, just because I was like, it blew me away. I had never experienced anything like that in a game.
So
that
hard
was-
to find anything like that anywhere in any game.
I don't think I've been hit like that necessarily the exact same way. It's come close though,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got lots of other games that have done the same thing. But Bioshock, for me, first Bioshock was the most notable one that comes to mind right now.
Yeah.
Grant, how about you?
Well, I want to come back later because I think that moment in Bioshock wasn't for this, but was an eye-opening moment for me, just in the commentary it made on the nature of being a player in a story.
I was
So-
going to say that's something you can talk about too. So.
Yeah, I want to come back to that later. For me, actually, this was when I was about 12 or 13, and I played the first Kingdom Hearts, right?
Okay.
And so when you get into Kingdom Hearts, you're like, oh, okay, it's like Final Fantasy and Disney, and like Final Fantasy gets a little dark in some places, but you know, it's just gonna be a Disney game, so I figured it'd just be kind of a fun action RPG, and you'd run around and hit stuff with a big key, and it'd be Disney movies. But anybody who's played the Kingdom Hearts series knows that it never gets super, super dark, but it gets pretty dark considering the source material it draws off of. And the first Kingdom Hearts game, you know, for a multitude of complicated reasons, surprise, the rival friend character ends up getting controlled by the bad guys. It basically comes down to the fact that the only way that Sora, the protagonist, can open the thing he needs to open to save the world, and save the universe even, is to release his other friend's heart, who is actually dwelling inside his body. So then you have this really difficult boss fight against Riku, and he reveals that before the fight. So then after the fight, there's a scene where Sora realizes what he has to do, and he takes his Keyblade and basically he stabs himself in the chest in the middle of this arena, and it goes into like slow-mo as he's falling and turning into little shards of light and everything, and then, of course, because it's Kingdom Hearts, they have to blunt the emotion by having Donald Duck call out to him, because that was the great thing in both of those games, was something very serious is happening right now. We're having a very serious discussion. You know what the best way to maintain the tone right now would be? Have Donald Duck say something. Anything. Literally. Yeah, it's great. And then, of course, Kairi, who he's saving, wakes up from her comatose state just in time to run over to him and try to catch Sora as he's falling, and then he disappears and falls through her hands.
Wow.
And it's just sad and horrible, and I wasn't expecting it whatsoever. So that's both, I think, the first time I can think of that a game really hit me, and also still, I think, is the bar. I'm just like, oh, I wasn't expecting it. I was not expecting, oh, okay, this is the part where the main character commits suicide to save the world.
Yeah.
I need ice cream.
Yeah.
That caught me off guard.
Yeah, that caught me off guard. So for me, that would be
Donald Duck
that.
very depressed.
Yeah, it made Donald Duck very sad. Yeah. So that was me. That was Kingdom Hearts. So Jessica, what about you?
So definitely the most notable, easily, and I'm shocked that, like, this Jeff here didn't say it, was Stanley Parable.
All right.
Okay, yeah, that's a good choice.
No, so nothing has shaken me to my core quite like Stanley Parable has, and so if you haven't played it, you should, and play it with headphones in a dark room.
At 2 o'clock in the
At 2
morning.
o'clock in the morning. And
When
make
you're
sure-
vulnerable.
And make sure you have, like, your security blanket, teddy bear, whatever, waiting for you. Because you're going to need it. Because, like, you know, if you follow along with what the narrator says, you get, like, the quote-unquote happy ending, but there's nothing satisfying about that. And so then, you know, and no matter what, when the game ends, you just immediately start up again. And this is how the game works. But if you break from what the narrator is telling you to do, you get a whole multitude of endings, you know. So there's, like, the first time I played, the first thing I did was I went and I accidentally saw things before I was supposed to, and it freaked me out, so then I just started following the narrator again, and I got the happy ending, but it was kind of like, eh. And then another time I broke away, and I found the whole list of different endings that you can get, and it was crazy, and tree branches forever, and it was shocking. All kinds of interesting things as to how many ways this game can branch. One of them continues to just, like, I'll have nightmares and get sick over it. And essentially what it is so it's another one of you're not paying attention to the narrator, but you picked a route that basically there's just a staircase down into a hallway, and at the top of the staircase there isn't a rail. Like, so very top of it there isn't a rail. If you walk all the way down the staircase, there's, like, this room that has, like, ambient music and these flashing lights, and it's all very calm and zen. And the narrator's like, here, why don't we just, you know, please, let's, you know, Stanley, please, just, like, let's stay here for a while. You know, isn't it nice here? And you can just stay there. But eventually you get really bored because you're just staying in a room with lights and ambient music.
Yes.
So then you go up to go leave, and the door won't open. And so the only thing you can do, and you can go back to the room, and you can go up, you can go back, but the only thing you can do in order to get any kind of reaction out of the narrator, the only way to end the game is to go to the top of the stairs and jump, and you don't die. And he says, oh my God, Stanley, please don't do this. And so you have to go up to the top of the stairs and jump. And you still don't die. And you have to keep doing this, and I mean, like, I felt sick afterwards. Like, I needed some I was at my parents' place at the time I was playing this, and I went to my mom and just, like, sobbed into her shoulder. I was not okay.
So,
like, it was just, I mean, like, because the other thing you can do, of course, the whole point of that is you could turn the game off, but why would you?
so does it just endlessly loop with you jumping and
No,
turn the game off?
no. It'll keep going until you do eventually die, and then
Okay.
the narrator's just weeping over your
Okay.
death, and then it starts up again.
They just make you do it multiple times to make it hurt.
Oh yeah, and then it starts up again, and
They
you're
just
sitting
they
at
just
the,
drag you through the shit
yeah,
a little bit.
and then you're just sitting at the desk as usual, and then you start all over, and the narrator's, you know, doing what, and it's just...
You know what that ending needed more of? Donald Duck.
It did. It did. Honestly, if Donald Duck were there, I would have been like, yeah, we're good. Oh, heartbreaking. Like, sickening. I still, like, talking about it is giving me shivers and my stomach doesn't feel right.
I'm just glad a game gives you the actual existential dread that, you know, Groundhog's Day couldn't actually give you.
Right?
Yeah.
But the suicide scenes in Groundhog's Day are dark,
But
but...
they're kind of funny.
Drive
They're
angry.
the funniest part of the movie. Just him dropping the toaster.
Oh,
Kills me
drive
every
angry.
time.
Yeah.
Kills him every time, too.
Well,
But don't.
so that's obviously, like, what rocks you most emotionally or whatever, but how do we get how do we get that good story? Like, how do you think we can deconstruct a good story to just some core elements that lead to good stuff? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That was horribly phrased.
No, I understand what you mean. And I think if we look at everything everybody said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure really at the core of everything that everybody said was basically just having characters that you feel a connection to. I mean, Stanley Parable is a little bit of an odd one, but it sounds like part of what made... I mean, I haven't played it, but it sounds like part of what made that so emotionally affecting for you was the fact that it was the way the narrator was reacting to your actions.
He sold it.
Yeah.
He absolutely sold it.
Without a doubt, the narrator, I mean, so the really interesting thing about the Stanley Parable, and I could probably talk about that game for a lifetime, but essentially there are 3 characters. There's the narrator, there's Stanley, and then there's you.
Right.
And you are Stanley and you are not Stanley. And so that's why there's like this weird blend of... It's really intriguing. And so like there's how the narrator is reacting to you, and then there's how the narrator is reacting to Stanley. And that leads down some very interesting things, and you create that connection both to the narrator and to Stanley.
Yeah,
because
of course.
He's you. You got to take care of him, but also you got to make sure he isn't stuck in this hopeless life of just constantly pressing buttons on a keyboard
That
for
appear
all
on a screen in front
for
of him.
all eternity. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, like, you know, so there's that, and then, like, with Dragon Age, we could, I mean, if I were to go back and watch it, we could probably have a whole conversation about who started singing in what order and what that says about their character development at that very moment. Imoen and Irenicus in the Baldur's Gate scene, absolutely.
Yeah.
Andrew Ryan, and then Mansoor and Riku, all incredibly well-drawn characters that, you know, that you forged that connection to over the course of the game in one way or another.
I will hold that Irenicus is one of the best villains in video games.
Well, it's also interesting that all of our examples kind of have a sense of betrayal, except mine, maybe, have a sense of betrayal in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you, like, saw someone tortured, and that's not something you realized could happen. You realized you were mind controlled, that's not a thing that should happen. Your hero died. You had to commit suicide forever.
Quite brutally.
These are things that we, like... It's weird to say violation, but it's like something that we did not see coming.
It was unexpected.
Well,
It was unexpected.
yours, there is an unexpected nature to it, right? It's not so much a betrayal; it's a happy accident sort of thing. But like,
there's
like
hope where there was none.
You didn't know that there could be something like that, and then it comes up unexpectedly, and it's the surprise.
Well, and also I think with yours, Paige, it does still count for that, because even though the moment itself isn't necessarily a betrayal or anything, it does come right after your main hub for the first act of the game, that you're assuming is going to be your main hub for the whole game, gets assaulted and burned to the ground.
Yeah.
I'd say it's a betrayal of your expectations. You expect everything to be dark and doom and gloom, and then they give you hope.
Yeah.
You're, what?
So the 4 of ours, we all had things that were relatively dark going on, whereas with Dragon Age, kind of dark stuff had been happening that whole time. So the thing that made it emotionally affecting was that you finally got to see the hope in what had basically been a dark game from minute 1 up to that point.
So I think, really, then what that's saying about what really affects us in story is when a game doesn't give us what we expect or what we think we wanted, but it gives us something more to chew on than we were going in for.
Precisely, and I want to jump in here because I went to school for marketing somewhat and writing, but part of the reason I actually really liked both of those areas of focus is because they overlapped a lot actually, and one way in which they do is when I was taking my marketing classes, there's an idea behind how marketing just works overall, and the whole idea, part of the whole idea behind it is the concept of surprise and delight, meaning. The main way you can actually please, the people you're trying to sell a product or a service or an idea to, whatever it is if it's something that surprises them, meaning it's not something they expect, but also that it delights them, meaning that it's something they didn't expect, but they like it, or it's made their situation better, it's made their experience better, it's made their feelings better. And I think that's exactly what we're saying here, because unexpected does not mean good, necessarily. Unexpected can mean bad. Like there are tons of moments I've had in games where something has hit me and I completely didn't see it coming, and I hated it. And not even just in the way like, oh well, that makes me upset, because I'd argue that also works because it adds depth to the experience, right? I'm immersed now. I care more now. But I've had it happen where something unexpected happened, and I'm like, well, that was stupid, and it just knocks me out of the whole experience, and I'm like, well, I wish. Well, that's unfortunate. I guess.
See also all of Far Cry 3.
I would also argue Modern Warfare 2.
Yeah.
Well, because the first Modern Warfare was so effective in its moment of betrayal and surprise and delight, and then in Modern Warfare 2, they tried to do the same thing 4 times.
So I've never heard the word delight used to describe getting hit by a nuke.
That's okay. That's fair. That's entirely fair.
But no, you're absolutely
it
right.
delighted us as the player.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Well, the term delight here may not specifically be like, oh, that delighted me. It's the idea that it, as like Paige said, it added to your experience. It gave you something more to
Absolutely.
to have fun with.
It took you further down the rabbit hole.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got surprise and delight. We've got character connection.
I'd like to add one more if possible. I would like to throw out brevity as a core element, because
As a Metal Gear fan, I'm offended by this statement.
well, see, here's the thing. When I say brevity, I don't necessarily mean using a small word when a diminutive one will do. What I mean is there are times when you can belabor a point, and there are times when you can simply make one and move on, and the skill of knowing the difference can be very critically important. I want to go earlier in Dragon Age to Dragon Age Origins, where I remember when they were developing it, they were touting that the script was over 100,000 words.
Oh, more than
I
that.
said to myself, well, is that's great, but does that mean the writing is good? Not necessarily. And there were plenty of moments where I had a 5-minute conversation with someone that could have been done while still offering character development, while still offering depth of world, and I could have gotten it done in a minute and a half. And there's a difference between dragging the player experience out and offering what is necessary with a little bit more, enough to keep them entertained. And I think that form of brevity can be very important to telling a good story.
I agree completely. And I think you actually touched on something good. Also important to that, though, to add on to that, is there is a difference between being forcibly dragged through a story
Yeah.
and being given the opportunity to dive deeper.
Yeah.
And I think most people, in fact I will say everyone, will mostly prefer to just be given the opportunity or easy access to dive deeper than forcibly be dragged through a story that they may or may not really care about.
Again, Bioshock.
Yeah.
Stardew Valley.
Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
Bioshock, Stardew Valley, tomato, tomato.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
actually,
there are a lot of tomatoes.
And tomatoes.
yeah. And actually, just another good example of diving deeper in a less story-oriented game, Gears of War 2 actually had collectibles where you would go by and just pick them up, and then there was a separate little menu that you could go into, and it would give you a little letter that you would get from Baird, one of the characters, talking about that collectible and what it means, what's going on. And it was a really interesting way to just say, hey, there is more here in a game which otherwise is all about decapitating people with a shotgun. There are definitely good ways to do it, and we need to see more of it. So
I think, I could be wrong on this, but I think that specific mechanic that was actually present in both Bioshock and Gears of War, just like the collectible that gives you more, I want to say that started with like Resident Evil. It may predate Resident Evil, but at least the earliest example I can think of off the top of my head was the old Resident Evils. You'd be wandering around, and it was just, get from point A to point B, solve puzzles, and don't get eaten by zombies. But you'd find lab reports, you'd find letters, you'd find stuff that was just memos you could read through to give you a little more backstory on the world, and sometimes there might be the solution to a puzzle in there, but for the most part, it was just added flavor.
yeah.
I would definitely say that. I mean, I know what you mean, that it started there for, your classic shooter
Yeah.
type, but it very much was pulled from your just standard adventure gaming, right?
Yeah.
Because you pick up
Specifically that format, though?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, in a lot of classic adventure games, you go around and you read stuff that is utterly useless, but you do it because, it gives you a sense of the world, but there's also a chance that you'll find the solutions and stuff in there. Most of the time, though, it's pretty useless.
Can I actually ask a question on that? Because I actually haven't played it. I know many people here have, or I haven't played all of it. But would Myst be an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, in Myst,
Yeah, I guess it
there
would.
are a
Think about
lot
that.
there are a lot of solutions to puzzles that are everywhere, and so you feel the need to look at everything and read everything, mostly because you know, you have no idea what's actually going to be useful. But like 90% of it, maybe not quite that much, but quite a bit of it is just flavor.
Yeah, but the flavor, I would argue, is kind of essential to what makes the game what it is.
Oh, definitely. But my point is, like, technically speaking, you could take out a lot of that reading material and
True.
just have the answers,
Just have the solutions to the puzzles.
with like the tiniest bit of flavor in there to make it seem quasi-normal, and then and you could still get some really nice exploration. I mean, it's a gorgeous game, right? Like, you don't need all of that reading material, but it's there and it works.
It absolutely does.
And I don't know if this is me getting ahead of myself, but I think that's one of the things that's interesting about video games as a medium. Is you can choose to some degree, depending on the game, how much story you want. Like,
Precisely.
Gears of War, Myst, like, and other games even, if you do more side quests, you get more story. If you look at more stuff, you get more story. But if you just want the core game, you can go through in a core game. Like a movie, you have 2 hours of material to give a story, and that's all you get. You know, a book, it's what's in the book. Maybe, like, you get a J.K. Rowling Pottermore situation, but video games, two people could play through the game, and one of them would just get a really bare bones experience, and the other one would have like a whole world opened up to them.
Precisely.
Prime example of this in Bioshock, in the first level medical pavilion, I didn't know there was a dentist's office that you could visit.
Oh my god,
no!
Until my third time playing through the game. I didn't realize you could get in there.
I didn't either, actually.
Yeah.
The second time
I ran into that. I ran into the first time I played it. I just was playing on my brother's file and I did it. Oh god.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in Metal Gear Solid, like Phantom Pain, there is a whole character and storyline that you can just ignore. If you don't go into this one room, it's gone.
Yeah, there's a whole side thing it's the story never brings you there, never draws attention to it. On your mother base, there's just a door that you can open, and if you go in, there's a whole side story in there. Wow. And you can easily ignore it. I was talking to my friends like, hey, have you done this thing in the medical wing yet? And he went, what are you talking about? And he was like 3/4 of the way through the game.
Right.
I was like, oh dude, go do that. And you could go through the whole game without it.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I think that's something unique that games have that you can't... I mean, you can hide little Easter eggs like that in TV or movies or something, but it's much easier to hide cool little things like that. Like one that I didn't discover until my second or third playthrough of Psychonauts.
Yeah.
Is in one of the tutorial levels of Psychonauts. You're inside the brain of Mia Vodello, who's one of just this sort of hippy-dippy guidance counselor-y, really laid-back Psychonaut who trains you, just one of the basic tutorial levels. And it's teaching you how to use your little psychic ball thing to move around quickly. And there's a half pipe at one part of the track that if you go back and forth on the half pipe, you can get up into a secret ledge that isn't there, that you can't normally see. You can get up into a little secret ledge and you go in. And it actually, I was reminded of when you mentioned the Stanley Parable thing, because the entire time you're doing the tutorial, she's talking to you through a loudspeaker because you're inside her brain. Yeah. And she says like, oh, don't bother going in there, the party's still in here. But if you go in there, and it's like a weird sort of lava lamp 70s psychedelic world, you go into that random little room, and it's just a little room with a safe, and there's fire and screaming children. And if you go and open the safe, you get one of those little, just a little story slideshow thing that gives you a little backstory and about how she was like the matron of an orphanage, and at one point the orphanage caught on fire and she wasn't able to save any of them, and it was her burden she carried her entire life. And there's this traumatic thing that she has portioned off in this little part of her brain that she doesn't want you to see, and you can find that. Never comes up, never important. A little motivation to a mostly one-note character.
Yeah.
A little more depth. And you can't do that in a movie.
No.
I think what we keep coming back to here is that video games have the unique aspect of the more you put into it, provided the developer put it there, the more you can get out of it.
Sometimes. This is kind of one of those things where with video games there's a lot more material that you get right off the bat, I feel. So like you can explore on your first playthrough a lot more in a game than you can in a movie. Yeah. But once you hit 100% completion, you've hit 100% completion. As opposed to like a book or a movie, you can play through it over and over, and you get different things from it every time, just because you're looking at it from a new angle. And you can kind of do that with video games.
But what prevents you from doing that with a game? Because
I mean,
every time I replay through Metal Gear, I get something new out of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, with certain games, there's so much to them that it'll take you a really long time to get something, you know, to get all of the different things that you can pull from it, right? Like, but like, I don't know. For instance, I'm trying to think of a good example here, like, probably the Assassin's Creed games. I know I keep going back to them, but I've played through them many times, and I do still pull stuff from them. But once you get through a couple playthroughs, you're done. Like, there's nothing else to pull. It's just whatever's with the game, as opposed to, like, I can read and reread the same book over and over, and because I'm coming to it with new eyes, there's more there, right?
I guess it depends on the game.
It depends,
Yeah,
it depends on the game,
and it depends on the book.
It depends on the book.
It depends on how much the developer or author put into it.
Uh-huh.
I've played Bioshock probably 12 times by now. Every single time I got new stuff out of it. I played it a different way, which allowed me to experience it in a different way, and I felt differently about the game. I've read I, Robot probably 4 times now, and I got slightly different experiences. It stays much more homogeneous, but it's really a measure of how much the person creating it put into it, which allows you to get as much out of it as you can. That's what I'm trying to say. So
I hear ya.
And I hate to burst your bubble, I'd say the Assassin's Creed games, they didn't put that much into the later ones.
Not the later ones, but the early ones.
The early ones, absolutely, and you've played those a couple of times.
Yeah, I mean, like, but even so, like, probably after the second playthrough, it was the same game, right?
Yeah.
And that's true for most games for me, whereas I get much more out of books and movies, which is why I sort of, right? Just because you get a different sense for things. I don't know. I can attest to the fact that I may not know anything here.
Well, none of us know anything.
I know. I just sort of, like, from my perspective at least, I get a lot more from the first playthrough of a video game than I do a movie or a book, but I get more from the second go-through of a book or a movie than I do of a game.
Well, and I think it could also do with the focus of what you're going into for the genre. I mean, obviously we do go for games that make us think, or else we wouldn't be playing Bioshock.
Yeah.
But we also play a lot of games that don't necessarily need to make us think. I mean, like, I've played Sonic Adventure 2 Battle so many times, and do I need to think?
No.
I don't even need to think to go through the level because I know it by now. Like,
Yeah.
But I will go back to it.
Wait, you mean Shadow the Hedgehog isn't an edgy and deep character?
Shadow the Hedgehog is the most edgy and deep character.
Oh, man.
I just can't plumb the depths of his darkness.
There's just, yeah.
Why haven't-
you obviously just didn't get it.
Why haven't we been talking about the Shadow game this whole time?
There you go, the pinnacle of storytelling.
So, I mean, I think I'm not going to go down the stupid Roger Ebert, video games aren't art thing, because I don't believe that, but I think a lot of times we do just go for games like Connor played through the great and brilliant Shower with Your Dad, which I could play for hours.
Well, Shower with Your Dad Simulator 2015.
I'm sure that when you come back to that in a few years, even if, one day you come back to it as a father, you will not get more out of the experience of showering with your dad.
You're probably right. Yeah, I'll tell you, it's fair.
So the
But-
shocking
Might get
development
some-
that we've discovered here is that, hey, video games are different.
Yeah, so some
Yeah.
video games, focus more on story, while every book and movie has to focus to some degree on story, even if that story is, let's give Tom Cruise a reason to blow things up.
This is
All
true.
right. Yeah.
All right.
He needs no reason.
Scientology and his rage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Slight amount of cocaine.
All right. Well, okay. So then, if we're focusing more on video games that are focusing on story, what would be some other advantages, disadvantages? Do you think?
Well, I think we went to see Grant and I went to see Zootopia the other day, and one of the trailers beforehand was for the Ratchet and Clank movie. And I haven't played Ratchet and Clank. I've watched Grant play Ratchet and Clank, and it's kind of fun to watch someone play Ratchet and Clank because they're trying to figure things out, and people are saying clever things. But watching the movie trailer, it just seemed too slick and put together, even though it looks exactly the same. Because it took away some of the element of struggle because it's not interactive. Just like when you're watching someone else play, you can see like their hiccups, their challenges, and I'm not saying characters can't be challenged in movies or else we'd never have conflict in film, but to some degree it's an experience that's been put together for you. So when you go from an experience that you are going through and you are kind of charting a path, even if it's a railroaded path, and you take that away and you just put it to be a path that a film executive has put forward for you, it loses some of the charm.
That's why I feel like everyone who always says, like, oh, we need a Legend of Zelda movie, and I stop and I think, no, we don't.
No.
Because a Legend of Zelda movie either wouldn't be Zelda, or it would be watching some pretty blonde actor walk around and go, wait, okay, can I hit it with my boomerang? No, not quite enough range. Okay. What about over... I need a key. Hold on, let me check my map. Except he wouldn't talk. So it would just be watching a dude be puzzled for an hour and a half.
And yelling, "Yat!
Yat!
Yat!"
I don't know. That could be a fun YouTube series. You watch a guy be puzzled for an hour.
Or like there was an announcement a couple years back that they were looking into a Myst movie, and I think it was Penny Arcade.
Penny Arcade.
Did a comic. Yeah, I'm like, okay, what if I pull this lever? Okay, that doesn't do anything. What about this one? Oh, I think that did something. Let me go back and check here. Myst, the movie.
Last panel was Myst. Coming to theaters. It's like, what does this lever do?
Well,
I forget what my point was when I started talking.
well, but I think that's why
yeah,
we've had trouble like making a good video game adaptation to film. I mean, like, Scott Pilgrim is probably the best video game movie, and it was based off of a book.
Yeah.
And it's because to turn a video game into a movie, you have to take away the element of interactivity. And I'm not saying that's the most important part of any storytelling experience, but by taking it away, it's highlighting something that you had and you don't have anymore. While if you take a movie and turn it into a video game, you're adding the element of, here's something you loved, go play in it.
Actually, I had that thought earlier, too, of talking a lot about why story matters in video games and what really makes it, why is it different with video games than with books or with movies or plays, even anything else. And because some video games do give you that ability to kind of branch off, do whatever you want, but a lot of video games, the story is pretty railroaded, right? There's a track you follow. It's, for the most, more or less on rails. You have to go this way. That's just how it is. You have to go this way to progress. But there are plenty of games that do have that structure, and they still come out in the end by having very, very good stories, and everyone loved them. So I think it's weird, because we think the whole on-tracks thing is generally a bad thing, because that makes you feel... But the reason we think that's a bad thing is because that implies a player has no choice. And what matters, and what gives a lot of people that feeling of engagement and joy with video games in particular, is they have a choice. Or even like you said, it's interactive. They get to directly make decisions and act within this game's world and this story to make things happen. And even when it's on rails, you can have that interactivity. You can still have them make choices, and it affects things differently, or they feel like they're involved. As long as that's there, I think that makes people feel engaged. And that's really what makes stories enjoyable. Is if you're not engaged, then the story may as well not be there. You don't care.
Yeah.
So other advantages, disadvantages of games as a storytelling medium.
The big disadvantage I see is just accessibility. Because, like, there are some books that are deeper than I can read. Like, I probably would not get everything from, James Joyce's Ulysses, but if I stuck to it, I could read every word in that book going front to back. Like, there is no movie that if I sit and focus and put my eyes on the screen for 2 hours, I will have finished it. Like, I don't care if it's, like, a David Lynch movie. I will have watched it. I might have to watch it a few times and still hate it, but I finished it. But, like, for an example, Infamous Second Son. I watched Grant play through it. I was interested in it. I wanted to play it. I have still not finished it, and it is sitting on my shelf because I cannot finish it. I don't know, what happens in the later parts of the games except what Grant has told me, because I do not have enough skill to finish it. And so video games can bar access after a certain point if you do not have, like, the brain power or the finger dexterity.
That's a very good point. The gameplay can completely get in the way of the story. If you can't get past a certain point, either just because of you're not used to it or you don't have the brain power to do it. I could not progress in XCOM. My own personal experience here. I could not progress in XCOM Enemy Unknown when it came out because I could not get past the base level, I would keep dying every soul, because I had never played really that many tactics oriented games. I didn't have the mind for it. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was doing it. And after seeing actually all of you guys play it, you guys were all so much better than me. I was watching you do it, and I went, oh, I guess that makes sense. And I just changed the way I was playing it. Suddenly I could blow through it, finish it. It was great. I enjoyed it very much. One of my favorite games.
I remember I got to the first like terrorizing mission where you have to rescue civilians, and you were out, so you came home, and I just finished it. I was like, yeah, I just got through the first terror mission. I only lost 2 civilians. You just went, what the fuck?
Yes! I was like, what? No! I couldn't beat them. Every single one I played, I lost.
I know.
They killed me every time.
I got my first rating back as like a B, and Connor goes, seriously?
Yeah, how did you get a B? Like, moreover, how did you guys have generals?
Yeah.
The furthest I ever got was lieutenant, and then they just died. It was like, how do you do... So, but yeah, I understand completely, and that is a very good point, I think.
And
it can be a barrier.
We can all understand completely when we look at Dark Souls. I mean, like, to be fair, Dark Souls is one that the whole point of the game is...
You will die.
You will die, and if you can't if you can't finish this game, then you're just a puss. I mean, like... It's supposed to bar access, and I think there should be games out there that do that because, you know, then there's challenge to be met if you are of that skill level. But it does suck when a game gets so popular like Dark Souls got that, like, you really want to finish because there is some good stuff in there, but it is just a motherfucker.
Bloodborne. I'd say try Bloodborne. It's a little bit more accessible. It's a bit more fast-paced.
Oh, exactly. Even Dark Souls 2 was a little bit... Dark Souls 2 was significantly easier than Dark Souls 1. And Bloodborne seems to be kind of the nice blend of the two sort of thing. We'll see how Dark Souls 3 goes. Long story short, Dark Souls...
I think a really interesting definition, or I think a very interesting break between what a movie and a video game can be is looking at the Kingdom Hearts remixes, 1.5 and 2.5, because there are multiple games on each one, a Kingdom Hearts game, a side game that you actually need for the plot, and then another side game that you actually need for the plot that they've cut down to only cutscenes. They've just taken all the cutscenes out of the game, sometimes put a little bit of text in between them saying, this is what happened during the actual gameplay, and try to make it make sense in the cutscenes. And
that sounds infuriating.
Oh,
it was maddening.
Incredibly infuriating.
Like, I'd played one of the games, and I was like, oh, let's watch the movie of it, because she needed to get caught up, and I didn't feel like... I mean, it's not a very good game, so I wanted to spare her the experience.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there like, I hadn't played it in a while, so I'd forgotten some stuff, and we're both sitting there watching it, and I was like, I have no idea what's happening.
No, like, you don't know what's happening, because even when they fill you in for what happens during the gameplay, they forget little things along the way. It's like when you're telling a friend about a movie, but you've forgotten half of it.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's also just more boring. And just because part of what binds it together is that interactivity, and they kind of give themselves a little bit of a pass on making a high-quality movie because there's video game in between it.
Mm-hmm.
But when it turns into just a movie, you get really bored.
Well, there's no payoff.
And it just keeps going.
There's no payoff.
Yeah.
In a movie, you get the payoff of, oh, this is building, this is building, this is building, and then the climax happens, and that's your payoff of the story. Whereas in a video game, if it's a good video game, the payoff is going to be at least somewhat gameplay related.
Yeah, you're going to beat something big.
Yeah, so it was funny actually watching the Kingdom Hearts thing, because there'd be a cutscene, and then it'd be like, blah, and turn into a big monster, and there'd be the tense music, and you pull out your Keyblade, and you're ready to fight, and it just fades to black and goes to the next cutscene.
Yeah.
Because there was no cutscene there, it was just gameplay, and you fight it. And it's fun when you fight it, but it doesn't work in the movie.
At some point in there, it got dead. You know.
And then it died.
It was super cool.
One thing led to another.
The boss fight had 4 different forms.
Lots of explosions.
So I think just like video, if you directly try to translate the two, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting how people try to do it too. I mean, like, we've already talked about a few. One of my favorites is just that Prince of Persia movie. Which was like,
I tried to watch that. It was so bad.
It wasn't good. It really wasn't. I mean, like, I actually wouldn't even say it was bad. It was just sort of like, it was potato salad.
It occurred.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it was just sort of there, and it was like, okay. And you kind of see where they got it, and you're like, okay, but then like, what's frustrating is that Prince of Persia movie was, of course, based entirely off of Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, which is still one of my favorite games, and I love that game. I watched this movie, and I'm like, well, they didn't really totally fuck it up.
Not completely, but...
But then, you know, one that's coming out really soon that I'm kind of curious about, but it just because of the nature of it being a game adaptation, is that movie Hardcore.
Hardcore Henry.
Hardcore Henry, I think, is the actual
Yeah, where, you know, it's entirely filmed in first person, which will be interesting, because it does, like, based off of the trailers that I've seen and stuff, it looks like it's very much meant to be, like, you're sitting on the couch watching your friend play a video game sort of thing, which can be really fun. So, depending on the choices they make there, it could be an actually pretty okay movie adaptation of a game.
Yeah.
It's getting 89% on Rotten Tomatoes right now.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's doing really well.
That's really good for
Yeah.
a
I should like to
game
hear that.
adaptation.
Yeah, that seemed to me it was either going to be great or flop.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's how a lot of video game movie adaptations look, is that it's going to be like, well, that could be really cool, but chances are it'll suck. Need I remind you of Tomb Raider?
No, you need not.
Or it's an explicable sequel.
The sequel.
What sequel?
Yeah.
What sequel?
Actually, the first Tomb Raider, kind of watchable.
Yeah.
Enjoyable.
Second Tomb Raider, you go, why, Angelina? Why do you hurt me?
That's kind of like the Mortal Kombat movies.
Oh man,
Oh.
I love the Mortal Kombat movies.
Mortal Kombat movies are great. I will, in terms of strictly just, we took a specific video game and turned it into a specific movie, I still think The King is the first Mortal Kombat.
Oh man, I don't know. I think the Silent Hill movie, specifically where she like trips right at the beginning, brilliant.
Yeah, because you always trip on that spot in the actual game.
It is just it classic, beautiful.
The difference is the Mortal Kombat movie was based in a video game that's actually good.
Or Street
Moving on.
Oh.
Really quick, if you haven't seen, I'm telling everyone here, including the audience, if you haven't seen the Street Fighter movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme, go watch it right now.
God.
That sounds fascinating.
It
I
is-
haven't seen that yet.
It was on Netflix years ago, back when I first got Netflix. I'm like, Street Fighter the movie, let's watch this. And I'm like, oh god, this is a glorious train wreck.
And Ming-Na Wen, who voiced Mulan in Disney's Mulan,
Yeah.
and who's Agent May right now on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., she played Chun-Li.
Oh, that's
Oh, she did?
Yeah, she was Chun-Li.
It's
awesome.
great to look back at it. No.
Jean-Claude Van Damme was Guile. He was Guile.
Anyway.
Well, and I think, actually, I'm going to go back to Scott Pilgrim, because it is a really interesting example of something that was a book that was turned into a movie and a video game. And they weirdly work together.
They do.
Yeah, because the book explores a lot of things that the movie and the video game do not explore. It's got a lot more space to move around, because the video game is just a side-scrolling brawler.
Yep.
The movie is tighter than the books. Like, the books have a lot of weird loose ends that all come up in the 6th volume and then are never really explained. So the movie is a nice, tight package that's beautiful to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And the video game just means you get to beat stuff up as Scott Pilgrim. And do you really want other things than that?
I like to imagine that the video game is a video game that Scott made about his life after the events of the books.
Which explains all the lesbians.
Explains all the lesbians,
Okay,
yeah.
I can believe that.
And fighting the giant monster at the end.
Yeah. No, and so I think that
Yeah.
that's a weird example where they explore all three not all three. There's
Yeah.
no, Scott Pilgrim play, but they explore different mediums and like show some of the strengths of each one.
Yeah. I would like to just throw this out there. I find it interesting that one of the most successful examples, Scott Pilgrim, of having a book, a movie, and a video game, actually all three did rehash the same events, no matter how you spin it, whether it's Scott Pilgrim coming back and making a game, or whether you have more space or whatever it is. They're all three rehashing Scott Pilgrim and his relationship with Ramona, dealing with her 7 evil exes. Whereas I really think that most of the time what you have to do is look at a movie and say, where can this fit in to the video game's universe? Where can this benefit? There's already a pre-existing story. This game has hashed out this one particular thing. You don't necessarily need to retell it with the movie, and I think a good example of that was Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. They took the time to rehash the entire first game to no real benefit. nothing was added, nothing was really gained, nothing happened. While as if you were to go back to, and I know I don't shut up about it, Bioshock, there's the first Bioshock, there's Bioshock 2, which kind of finishes up Rapture's storyline, there's Bioshock Infinite, which I'm not even going to get into, and then there is talk of a movie. It's been in and out of the news for the past, 5 years now?
Long time.
Probably longer.
Very long time, and I keep thinking they could do a great job dealing with the founding of Rapture. You wouldn't even have to bill it as a Bioshock movie. Just call it Rapture and have it be about this guy, Andrew Ryan, who's a pure capitalist and wants to get away from the parasite big government.
Played by Tom Hanks.
Yes. But you could do that, and it would be absolutely fascinating. There would not be that much action or anything like that, but you could do it, and it would be great, and people would watch it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we've seen the reverse of that really well in Telltale's games. In Telltale's The Walking Dead, it takes place with a different group of people than the TV show. In Telltale's Wolf Among Us, it happens before the Fable comics and after some of the Fable comics that get flashed back to, so it's an interesting middle point that we haven't seen before. So there is more tension in the story. When you're watching, like, a movie that is just a rehash of a video game, you know what's going to happen. You don't really care. I mean, it's kind of the same problem you've got with movie adaptations of books when you've already read the book.
Yeah.
But when you're exploring a different subset, you don't know who's going to be okay at the end, whether it means they're going to live or die or just have their lives ruined or they're going to win the lottery. You have no idea, and it gets to explore another bit of the world, which makes the world itself more rich by looking at something different.
Kind of moving on away from like movie adaptations, because we got stuck on a little bit of a tangent. I'm curious as to, we know what a good story is. When do you think that actually saves a game? So when is a game kind of crap, but you know, like you run into a lot of glitches or have a lot of problems, but you can't stop because you gotta know what happens next?
Well, I'm gonna say my example. The gameplay isn't necessarily crap, but I feel
Crap being a loose term.
I wouldn't go as far as to say it's crap, but I think the gameplay in Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, is not the most thrilling. I remember when I was in high school, I lent it to a friend of mine, and then he brought it back the next day, saying it's dumb, it was a crappy game because you just run around in circles and just chop the enemy, like chop off an enemy limb, run around in a circle, and then come back and keep hitting it, and then none of the combat's ever challenging. And I didn't have the words for it back then because I was 14, but what I would say to that guy now is, well, okay, one, it's not quite that simple if you stick with it for more than the first 2 levels, but 2, that's not the point. You know, the gameplay in that game is very straightforward, the controls are a little bit tanky and weird. It, you know, from a gameplay perspective, it's not anything mind-blowing, but the way the story is presented, the way you get into each of the characters' heads, the way it all comes together, the sort of weird, creative eeriness of it all, and the emotional payoff of the ending, all come together to a game where, yeah, without its story, it would have been an entirely forgettable experience.
Well, I would say even the whole genre of adventure point-and-click games.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a crappy gameplay, because it's what they're going for, but if there wasn't a story behind it, it's basically at the same level as a Flash, hidden picture game, where you're looking for things, you find the thing you need, and you put it in the other thing that you need. But because they've got a really good story behind it, you care. I mean, something like Monkey Island is pretty simple, but it's funny, and it's interesting, and you're compelled.
Yeah. My example that I'm thinking of is, again, having to use crap as a very loose term, Fallout New Vegas. The gameplay itself, when it worked, was great. But that's the key thing, is when it worked. That game, when it dropped, was the buggiest piece of garbage I have ever played in my life.
You know, actually, I was just thinking, like, what are you talking about? Game handles really well, but I remember now when it first dropped, there was a bunch of bugs.
Remember when you gave Boone a stim pack and he lost 10,000 health and died?
Yes, I remember stabbing him in the eye with a stim pack. I also remember I was just walking south from Good Neighbor, or what? No, not Good Neighbor. I don't
Wherever.
know. Good Springs. Good Springs was the name of the town. Just walking south. Nothing around, I died. just passed out from sunstroke or something. I don't know.
Aneurysm is a bit too realistic for Fallout.
Exactly, you know?
You were playing hardcore mode.
I was not playing hardcore mode that time. But no, Fallout New Vegas, great game, fantastic story. One of the best I've encountered in video games, top 10 without a doubt. Oh my god. So that is, there is at least one time.
I think that applies to any Bethesda game, really. Well, that wasn't Bethesda, but
Well, it depends.
yeah.
So, what I'm hearing then, because I don't really have a specific example on top of my head for this, but it sounds a lot like kind of what we were. I know we sort of loosely talked about this before, but what really when a game story, how a game story can save a game that is otherwise bad, is when we perceive the reward of moving forward through the story or seeing what's next as worth going through the suffering that is this game. The whole point of it being rewarding, right?
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't do it if it wasn't rewarding. It's kind of at the core. That's kind of at the core of all human behavior, almost ever. But I'm sure I don't have to tell you that, Jessica, because you've learned about this many times in psychology course. But yeah, it seems that has to be the whole point, though. The story has to be something that is valuable to us. That we like this sucks. I don't want to do it, but if I don't do it, I won't find out what happens next. And for some games, it's like I can live without that. Or for some games, it's like I don't know if I can live without that.
Yeah.
I think I gotta know.
You guys remember GTA 4?
Oh. Oh God, yes. Oh my God, why did I think of that?
It's so compelling. I still have not finished it because the gameplay got to me a little too much. Occasionally I jump back and I'll get a little bit further, but then I get frustrated and then I set it down and then I forget about it for a lifetime. But compelling enough that months, even years after setting it down, I still go back because God damn it, I gotta know what happens to Nico.
It's
spoilers. He goes bowling.
He also goes to see big American titties.
God damn it, Roman. Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto 4 did have such a great story. Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it had a fantastic story that is unbelievably compelling, but God, the game can be very broken. I mean, you've seen me drive around. Part of that is I'm a terrible driver in video games.
The wheels are made of soap in GTA 4.
It's one of those things where it's like, I know I'm not great at driving in video games, but oh my God, after a while I gave up. I drive, I crash the car in some glorious explosion. It flips like 8 times. I kind of roll out of it and I brush myself off, walk up to another car that's driving up, punch the guy in the face, steal his car, and move on because I need to get to this spot.
It's the fastest way to travel.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like, and heaven forbid I end up in a race because you can't do it in those.
Oh,
and,
Brucey.
or-
Brucey.
Or if you need to escort anybody anywhere, my dates suck because it's like
Terrible.
you have to follow the traffic laws a little bit more, and you can't crash.
They'll get out and leave.
They'll get out and leave.
Let's
So
get
it's
out of the
like,
car.
all right, my romantic life is suffering because I cannot fucking play this
You
game.
don't understand the driving laws of this country.
It's wonderful, but it's awful.
Yeah, GTA 4 is the most compelling Grand Theft Auto game I've ever seen. I mean, I haven't played many of them, but I played 2, I played 3, Vice City, 4, and 5. And 5 I enjoyed greatly. 4, to me, though, in terms of just story, way better. My personal opinion, significantly better.
But 5 definitely had the incredibly polished gameplay that I would kill for them to remake 4 with the gameplay of 5.
Yeah.
Right?
I would say
just-
it would be excellent.
It doesn't even have to look better. It just put those mechanics into the game. I'll deal with the old school graphics. I just want to be able to play 4.
Someone's probably working on a mod for that as
I'm
we
sure.
speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just need to get it on PC, and I'm sure it's fine at this point. But like, you know,
The mods make it fine, so.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I mean, like, on the flip side, then, is there any sort of game or situation that you can think up where you get the story ruining the game, where like the gameplay actually works pretty well, but the story is just not good?
Yes, I have actually a great example for this, and Jeff actually brought it up earlier. Not in this context, but For me, the first Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4, great all-around game.
Yeah.
I was like the gameplay, and that was when I remember Infinity Ward, who developed Call of Duty 4, really kind of nailed down the gameplay formula of pointing and shooting.
Yeah.
Everyone loved Modern Warfare. It was fun to play. It was well made. Everyone enjoyed it, and the story was very good. I felt that the story and the gameplay worked together perfectly. I was so satisfied with the first Modern Warfare. Then Modern Warfare 2 came.
Then everything changed.
Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Well, it never changes, except in this case it did. Modern Warfare 2 comes out, and as Jeff said before, the gameplay was the same, if not better, because they had already polished it to a point of like near perfection.
Yeah.
You didn't have to change anything. The shooting mechanics were great. Just running around, moving throughout the
We could tell
the
they
levels.
were perfect because they haven't changed since.
Nope.
Yeah,
they
that's
work.
really true.
Yeah, the gameplay works. Solid. The way you move throughout the game, level design, pretty solid. But what they did in Modern Warfare 2 was, as Jeff said earlier, they kind of tried to do the same thing with Modern Warfare 4, in the first Modern Warfare, where they had that successful climax and the betrayal moment, and it built up and it exploded in this glorious ending, and it scales down in a way that we're like, wow, what a ride. Modern Warfare 2 was like, we're gonna do that now, and now, and now, and it just kind of kept roller coastering, and you're like, what the hell is even happening?
Was it 2 where you randomly play as an astronaut for one level?
No.
No, that was
Black
Ghosts.
Ops or 3? Oh, Ghosts, yes, Call of Duty Ghosts.
Yeah.
I believe was your astronaut.
Ghost was also such a terrible story.
Actually, no, 2 may have been...
No,
yeah,
2. You had the one where it was like...
The Russians set up an EMP.
Yeah, and so then you
Set up
look
an
and you see the explosion
yeah.
from orbit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just...
And you get shot off into space by the EMP.
And you know...
By the way, some random astronaut also died.
And you know why? Because they forced you through it. They dragged your ass up into space, put you in an astronaut where you couldn't even do anything. You just sat there and watched. And to be fair, in the first Modern Warfare, there was the nuke moment where you got knocked out of your helicopter, your whole platoon died because a nuclear bomb went off, and all you can do is wander around as the freaking nuclear wasteland becomes reality. And it's jarring, and it's very, very well done, but the gameplay suited the way the story was going. It fit. It felt like this is all you could do. I wasn't like, why can't I run around? Why can't I go shoot this thing? I was like, oh wow, this is bad.
I can't run because I just got hit by a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, and they just drag your ass up. For Modern Warfare 2, they drag your ass up into space, and they're like, oh, here comes an EMP. Okay. Oh, that's bad. I guess I can't. Oh, here I go. And that's it. And throughout Modern Warfare 2, it was the same thing. The gameplay was so good, but the story just left so much to be desired. I wasn't satisfied. It had all these climactic moments, or at least moments that were supposed to be climactic, and they never hit me the same way they did in Call of Duty 4. And the reason I think that they didn't hit me that same way is just because of the way it was structured. It wasn't this big build-up over time and then a climax. It was just lots of short little climaxes, and I could tell they were just kind of trying to force me into feeling like this was supposed to be important, or I'm supposed to be scared or jarred by it, but I wasn't.
They were trying to punch the adrenaline button again and again and again, and it didn't work.
Well, I think what's also interesting is, you were talking about Modern Warfare 2, which is a game where just the story kind of sucked, right?
Kind of is not a strong enough word.
Like, we're dark and edgy because there's a mission where you shoot civilians, and we're going to accidentally leak it. I'm making giant air quotes. Because that totally wasn't a publicity stunt.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, no, the obvious publicity stunt there. So, there's that, where the story was just terrible to begin with. But I think what's almost worse is when you get a game where the story's good and good and good, and then it just all falls to shit. I think that is almost worse.
Yeah.
So for me, the big example of that, whenever anybody mentions it, talks about just games where the story ends up being a letdown, for me that's Final Fantasy X. And I know there are places where I get, strung up by my fingernails for saying that, but I'm sorry, the story of that game was terrible, because the first, 2/3 of it are really well executed. Of the entire franchise, it has the best world building. The main characters are well developed, even if the secondary characters aren't so much. It's got an interesting conflict. It all works really well, and you're invested and you're into it, even if it's got hiccups here and there. And then at the end-ish, in the last act of the game, 2 major plot developments occur. Well, one halfway and one near the end. These 2 major plot developments occur that both completely shatter one of the basic rules of the universe. because one of the basic rules of the universe is if somebody dies, a summoner has to do this ritual so that their soul can move on to the afterlife. Otherwise, they turn into these monsters called fiends, which are the monsters you fight in the game. And it's nice because it's like, oh, there's an actual in-universe reason for there to be monsters beyond just here be monsters. And at one point, you kill an antagonist, and he never gets sent, they call it, and then he just turns into a super boss. Like, he just turns into this god-powered super boss you fight 4 more times across the course of the game. And then there's another part where, in late stages of the game, you find out one of your party members has been dead this entire time.
What?
And,
What?
like, yeah, just like he died 10 years ago, and he never got sent, so he's just been walking around. And, like, you stop and think, oh, right, anytime Yuna performed the sending dance, this guy conveniently wasn't there for some reason. I guess that makes sense. No explanations ever given for how they don't turn into a monster. And it's just never even mentioned. And then the entire plot twist surrounding the origins of the main character are not thoroughly explained at all. Like, the game becomes a David Lynch film for 10 minutes, explaining it, and then it's never explained, and then at the very end it's like, you know that if we do this, then you'll disappear forever. And he's like, I know. Like, what? You never said that.
We didn't.
I know. This was never explained. You had a weird little kid cryptically talking for a few minutes, and you were supposed to pick this up. Because he totally got it. So obviously you should too. And so for me, like, that's why I can't go back to that game. Because the gameplay, because we were talking about gameplay, the gameplay is excellent. The gameplay is probably some of the best in the franchise. Some of the best in RPGs. It's tight, it works, a couple issues here and there, but it's really, really well executed, and it's a lot of fun to build your characters. But then those couple gigantic plot holes completely ruin the experience for me.
And you said you don't want to go back and play it again.
I really don't.
Yeah, because of that.
I played it when I was younger, and I thought it was dumb, and then in college I was like, let me give it another shot, because I was younger, then I probably just didn't get it. And I tried to play it again, and watching that same scene where they explained the whole plot twist again, I was like, no, this still doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, no, it wasn't that I was just young and wasn't paying attention and missed it. It was just that it doesn't make any sense.
Again, to the point of reward. It's not rewarding.
No, it wasn't rewarding.
So why would you want to do it again?
Well, and I think that there's a cost to setting up your own internal logic. Like, if you want to have a game where random stuff happens for the entire game, the story's not as interesting, but it's fine. Like, if you want to play Calvin Ball with your rules, as long as the gameplay's solid, go for it. But when you're going to go and set up a mythos, if you're going to say, these are the rules for this world, you can't break them. Yeah, if you set up promises, you keep those promises in any medium.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, that's not video games, that's just basic science fiction.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, that's basic
storytelling.
Basic storytelling, but especially in science fiction, if you're going to set the rules of how your mystical crap works.
But I mean, in any kind of story, when you read the first half of a book, you have expectations. Like, this is going to be paid off. I don't know how it's going to be paid off, but this needs to be paid off. Like, you put the gun on the shelf, you're going to fire it.
That's true.
And so it works with rules, but it also just works with the things you set up.
Well, I would argue that you can break the rules if you make it a point.
Oh, yeah.
Prime example, you put the gun on the shelf, you know you're going to fire it, you go to fire it, and it's loaded with blanks.
Uh-huh.
You know, that is the kind of thing which you can do and can honestly make for an even better story if you take the time. You know what, let's go back to Bioshock. Bioshock, one of the rules of playing a video game is you progress forward. It's what you do. Suddenly you realize your character has been doing this because he's being mind controlled. It delightfully breaks what you expect. And it delightfully breaks the rule of moving forward.
Yeah, and that goes back to the concept of surprise and delight and betrayal. Because and by that I don't mean that things have to go the way you think they're going to go, but they have to remember their own rules.
Yeah.
And I would just say that, like, and when you say, like, you put the gun on the shelf and you shoot it and there are blanks inside, that's still following the rules. You put the gun on the shelf, you fired it. You didn't know there were blanks in there.
All right.
Right? And
Yeah.
that's, the surprise and delight was there were blanks and not bullets, but...
All right.
But the gun was on the shelf, the gun was fired. Not, the gun was on the shelf, it sat on the shelf, we never picked up the gun. The gun just sort of melted.
Someone makes a mod where you can fire the gun.
Yeah, exactly.
But it crashes your PC.
This is not a Bethesda game.
No.
Did I say that?
Say what? I heard nothing.
And then there's another mod where the gun goes off and it's just the John Cena theme.
This gun shoots little Randy Savages.
Then beat up the enemy.
So, when does the gameplay and the story complement each other? I will hold Stanley Parable as one forever because it's awesome.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
very much the way you play that game is in line with the story of that game.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are others.
No, and that's actually a very good point. That's a very good example of one where the gameplay completely, I think, flows well with the way the story was designed. One example that I came up with this immediately, and when I was thinking about this before the show, actually, was Hotline Miami. Game came out a few years ago. I got really into it for a few reasons. One was because the gameplay was just really fun. If you haven't played Hotline Miami, the whole point is it's top-down, and you're sprinting through rooms where there are enemies who all respond and attack you very, very quickly. It's like you need to be twitch fast in reacting to these situations and moving around, or else you're going to die and you'll have to start the level over. So the whole game is very fast-paced and kind of stressful, but in a way that's challenging and stimulating. You gotta be like, blah, you have to think really fast and react and go blah, and go kind of crazy. And that in itself is fun, but what made it really interesting, I think the reason I got so obsessed with it and really into it, was because the story is kind of the same way. The whole point of the story is you're playing as these characters. I think in Hotline Miami it's really only one or two. In Hotline Miami 2 you expand it to multiple. But in Hotline Miami you play as this character or characters who are just kind of obsessed with violence. And they don't even necessarily understand why. Part of the story of the game is delving into that and seeing why, like, is that, like, questioning, is this wrong, is this right, it's the way I feel, is this natural, is it unnatural, what does this say about our society, like, why am I like this, and then the whole psychosis aspect of it too, where you're like, you're not sure your character is totally sane, and so you have all those metaphors and imagery and things coming into play, but it totally complements the gameplay, because the whole point is, that's kind of how your character feels. It's just a maelstrom of chaos and violence, and you have to react just because it's what's pushing you forward, and you feel compelled to do it. But at the same time, there's this inner conflict of whether or not what you're doing is supposed to be right. I mean, you want to do it no matter what. You're going to do it no matter what. But what does this all mean? It's just very chaotic. The whole story was chaotic. The gameplay was chaotic. And when you put them together, it made a fantastic experience. And that's why I love Hotline Miami.
That and the soundtrack.
And I think it's
Yes.
interesting how you can apply a different storyline to the same gameplay and then completely change what the game is.
Yes.
Like Saints Row started as a basic GTA clone, right?
Yeah.
It did. Actually, I'm glad you're saying this.
Yeah, but then was it 2 or 3?
3 was when they went off the rails.
Yeah, 3 completely went off the rails, and suddenly you're hitting people
With a giant purple dildo.
Dildo sword, yeah.
Yeah.
And
The Penetrator, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yes.
it was called.
Yes.
and your character is a giant black man with pink kabuki hair, and you're body slamming people everywhere.
Oh, you remember my
I
character.
do.
Yes. And then you shoot the octopus cannon.
Yeah, it was the shark chum. Oh, yeah, the octopi.
Yeah.
Then you also had the shark gun, where it shot chum, and then a land shark would come up out of the ground and eat them.
Mm-hmm.
4 out of the dubstep gun.
I am a big fan of the dubstep gun. I haven't even played 4, and I'm a big fan of the dubstep gun. Because people will be dancing around you as you shoot it.
Yeah.
So just by adding a different flavor to the game and just saying, we are going to take the story and we are going to do something different, you could take 2 games with the exact same mechanics. Like, you could take a GTA, you could take a Saints Row, and build them off of the same mechanics and still have 2 completely different games because of how you decide the story should go.
For sure. I mean, I would point out, like, I know you were talking about playing Infamous. I'm not sure exactly how similar the gameplay is, but just because I need to play Infamous still, but I have played Sunset Overdrive, and it sounds like, generally speaking, they play very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Very wacky. Like, I love Sunset Overdrive. Just an unbelievably wacky gameplay of, like, you can never run, but you can move any other way you can think of. And you've got, again, the crazy guns that do weird things. Like, you can whack people in the face with hit records. And then the whole story of that game is wacky weirdness. And so the way you play the game is really nicely complemented by the story of the game. And I could see a lot of that gameplay actually working very well in a more serious toned game like Infamous, but it wouldn't be as wacky because, you know, dressed to be more of a superhero thing, right? Where you get to run up walls and so forth as opposed to running down the street, which is kind of boring, and every other game does that.
Yeah. No, and so I think we could do a whole episode on humor and its roles in games, but I think just by doing that, by adding story, you can reskin a game and like have totally different people appreciate it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just in terms of gameplay and story working really well together, I'm actually going to totally contradict myself and go back to Final Fantasy X, because this is actually something it does very well most of the time. In particular, the way that the game's character progression system works is that your characters level up and you spend their level up points giving them stat ups and new abilities and things, but eventually a character will reach the end of what they can do, and everyone is actually all in the same skill tree. So eventually when one character finishes their skill tree, you could port them over to another character's skill tree and learn a whole different set of abilities. And so eventually, if you put a ton of time into it, everybody could actually do everything. Except Yuna is the only one who can summon for story reasons. But there's a part of the story where Yuna, who's relegated to being your white mage for most of the game, she gets kidnapped at a certain part of the story. And so she's not with you. And if you've been more or less keeping pace with where the story wants you to be ability-wise, the main character, Titus, has just finished his branch of the sphere grid, and the easiest thing, his branch organically feeds into Yuna's. So he can start picking up some weaker healing magic and start to make his way down a white mage thing and become something of a paladin. And then in the story, that's about the time where he starts to kind of take charge and act like the leader of the group a little bit more, because he's getting more comfortable in what he's doing, and he starts to sort of become a little more filling that paladin role in the story. So the character, the writing character progression and the ability character progression and the story and gameplay all mesh together for this moment where the characters are actually progressing the way that the gameplay dictates.
That's brilliant.
It is really brilliant. It's like one of the really cool things the game does. And then contrasting that against, again, going back to Kingdom Hearts, I like to harp about how in the Colosseum side missions of Kingdom Hearts, there's one particular tournament where at the end of the tournament you fight Hercules. And you fight Hercules, and before the fight starts, Sora's like, hey guys, talking to Donald and Goofy, and says, hey guys, I want to see if I can beat Herc one-on-one. I'm like, you sure? He says, yeah, I want to see if I can do it. Because they knew the game would be, that the battle would be easier to do if they just made it a one-on-one battle between Sora and Hercules. And so they threw together, there's not even voice, just a little cutscene excuse for you to make it a solo battle. After you win the fight, Hercules is like, wow, Sora, you've gotten really strong, I'm really impressed. He says, yeah, I couldn't have done it without my friends.
Except that I just did.
So it's just interesting, like those two games came out around the same time, too, so it's just this kind of dichotomy of like, well, you know.
Yeah.
Well, and that happens, a lot in stories where, especially in open world experiences, there's a conflict between what the story wants and what the game wants. Like, how many open worldish games have you had, like, a big thing you need to do? Like, there are hostages dying somewhere.
How many Bethesda games have I played?
And there's no, there's not a time crunch. It's not like, if you don't do it in such and such many hours, the hostages will die. They're just kind of there chilling in some, supervillain's basement until you've collected enough, random materials to feel comfortable finishing the game, and then taken a side quest just because you felt like it, and then decided to make friends with the barmaid and see how that's going while these people are screaming in terror.
Let me finish this romance quest.
There's a really careful balance there. Because you want at the same time you want to compel the player through the story. Actually, I'm thinking of two games in particular about this. One is Mass Effect, and one is the Arkham series, the Batman Arkham series.
Yes.
Both games have as a part of their story very big things that need to be addressed right now. I mean, but they don't literally put you on a time crunch in most cases, where it's like, yeah, this is the next big thing. You need to go do this, Batman, or we need to go do this, Commander Shepard. But, if you want to go to the Citadel and buy some stuff, or maybe go do this side quest over here, drive around to the Mako, you can do that. And Batman, if you want to go to that Riddler quest, you can do that too. These hostages will just be here with a gun to their head for another hour. Just take your time.
Or week.
Or a week.
Or however long. I mean, no, that's always the fun thing of any sort of open world or open zone, I suppose, could work too. But just any sort of game that gives you the ability to roam and check stuff out and that sort of thing tends to fall a little to that, where it's like you're not really timed, so you can do whatever you want. One that I think actually handled the whole thing really well was Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
Yes.
Yeah, because they do actually have a few missions that are timed, but you don't necessarily get told that.
Yeah.
And so, you'll just get a fail because you didn't do it in time.
Yeah.
And really early on, one of the first things you can do, there's a little girl who's dying of the flu or some shit, and Geralt essentially says something to the effect of well, I can make Swallow, which is your generic health potion for Witchers.
Yeah.
But since she's not a Witcher, it could kill her. And they're like, please, anything, and you can kind of decide what you want to do there.
Mm-hmm.
And I went with, yeah, I'll make it, but I didn't know how much time I had. It didn't tell me I was timed. So I went off and
she just died.
Kind of did some other stuff. I wasn't totally sure how to make Swallow because it was really early in the game, and if you've never played a Witcher game before, it's not totally clear. They do lay it out for you later, but by the time you get to later, that little girl's dead.
Good job.
Yeah, and so I just get this fail, and I'm like, how did I fail the quest? It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the main plot points, the main thing that I think that they did really well, and this is just more of a creative choice that worked for them than I think it is necessarily something that will work for everybody every time, but their creative choice with that game was the main story is essentially you're trying to find your young apprentice Ciri and kind of get in touch with her to handle shit that's going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so a large part of the game is just following her tracks, which, if you want to find her speedily, right, you would theoretically go through all the main stuff as quickly as possible, but since you're following tracks, technically you could take as long as you want.
Yeah.
And it makes for an easy time to I know I need to find Ciri, but my friend over here is having some problems, so I'm going to go deal with that, and then I'll come back to this, and yeah.
It was funny as you were talking about the little girl dying. Reminded me.
Because nothing
children
says
dying.
comedy.
Nothing says comedy like little kids dying.
Yeah.
It was actually Metal Gear Solid 5 also did a send-up of that, of the whole time limit thing. The first real mission in the game is you're going to go rescue Miller, who's been taken captive by Skullface. And so Ocelot says at the beginning of the mission, I would guess Miller's probably got about 3 days before, they'll move him someplace else or he'll start giving up info or whatever. He's probably got about 3 days, so we gotta get him now. And, you pretty much would have to do this on purpose just because it's such a simple mission. But if you do somehow take 3 in-game days to get to him, they had a whole separate cutscene where you go and he's still strung up to the wall and you shake him and he's just dead. And it just says mission failed. And you start over because you took too long. He had about 3 days, and you took more than 3 days, and he died. And it was just interesting that they did that just for kicks, because there's really no way you could actually take that long to pull that off.
Well, I want to go back to games that complement each other, because I forgot to talk about it earlier. There's a game I have not played, and might not ever play, because I don't know if I can emotionally handle it, that just came out, That Dragon Cancer. Yeah, it's
I haven't heard of this.
It's very sad, actually. It's there was a guy and his wife and his son, his very young son, I think he was 3 or something, came down with cancer.
Okay.
And so he and his wife just have had to deal with having their kid have a terminal disease. And he was a game developer, and so he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to quit my job, and I'm going to make a game about this. And the whole game is just the experience of this man and his wife, this family, losing their child.
The family members did the voice acting
The
for
family
it.
members did the voice acting. But there are scenes, the whole thing moves kind of through a dreamlike state. You just kind of go from one scene to another scene, and they don't necessarily connect. And you cannot necessarily succeed. There's a scene that he took from his life where his son is crying because he's a little kid. He can't understand things. He's hurting. He wants food, and he's just, and the father can't give him food because it's not medically sound.
Yeah.
And he's just crying, and you can try anything. The game gives you options to try to fix things, and you cannot do it. And eventually, you just have to wait. And then if you go long enough, the father will start praying. Their faith is very important to his family. And this happened to him where one time he was just so fed up because he couldn't make this kid stop crying. He prayed and the kid stopped crying. And it just moved him so much.
Yeah.
And so the game makes it so you cannot fight the cancer. You cannot win. You can just experience it and go through it and just try as hard as you can. So you are forced to be as emotionally wrecked and as helpless and sometimes hopeful as this family was forced to be. So the whole point of all of the gameplay is to serve the emotional story.
I think I'll take a pass.
Yeah,
Actually.
because that's fascinating, and I'm glad it exists.
And I'm not going to play it.
I'm gonna go back to my JRPGs now.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I don't know if I could emotionally handle that.
Yeah, it's
No, I'd have to
I respect that they did it, but I don't know if I could emotionally
I
handle
saw
it.
an AMA, I think with the guy, or it was just a post about the story coming out, and just there were a lot of posts where it was I just had a kid, I am not playing this for 20 years.
Yeah, no, I pray for the day I'm in a good enough place to play that game.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, man. Just hearing about it is making me
But
sad.
I mean, that's a story that if you saw a movie about a family struggling with cancer, you'd be sad, but you don't have to be the one hitting the wall.
Exactly. Yeah, no, and in fact, I've seen movies like that, and, a few of them have shaken me to the point where I'm still thinking about them a week later or whatever, but eventually it's gone. You don't care. I mean, you do, but it's done.
Although I think we all know the best dealing with cancer TV show or movie.
Breaking Bad.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes, but it's interesting though. Is it kind of gets back to the whole point of why would anyone even play that? I think the whole point is because that game is almost entirely just story, right? It's a story with gameplay added to add a layer of interactivity to it. I'm assuming, but the whole point being is there is some reward there for finding out what happens with this story. If players get the chance to place themselves in this situation that they're not in and may never be in, and never have been in, probably in most cases. And
Hopefully.
Hopefully, but you get to experience all the lessons and literal physical experiences and just emotions that kind of come with that. And that story conveys all that to the player. And that, I think, to a lot of people is where the reward is. Why the reason that actually motivates them to actually play it is we want to know. We want to feel that. We want to know. We want to be there. And that's, I think, a great example. Because that game, I know this game, Gone Home, I think, is another game that's very heavily a story, not too much gameplay. But at the same time, it still gives you that feeling of engagement and reward as you play through and learn the story.
I mean, Quantic Dream. That's all they do.
That's right.
And of course, Telltale.
Yeah.
Telltale.
Yeah.
Telltale, of course.
That's all they do.
Big Telltale.
And so for this time's lightning round, we are going to go through and do Telltale doesn't present. So games we think that if Telltale made would, for whatever reason, not work, or will never be made. Miss Page.
Okay, I have had to babysit a lot. I was a teenage girl at one point, so I babysat a lot. And if you get babysit a lot, you are going to end up reading the boxes for game boards and learn that they actually have stories behind them. I do not want Telltale to present the gripping tale of Candyland. The kidnapping of King Candy, and there was something about a slog monster. I don't think even Telltale can save that.
I don't know, make that compelling.
Yeah.
It would end up being a very Alice in Wonderland sort of thing, but...
I think by the time that they read enough into that it's interesting, there wouldn't be much Candyland left in there.
This is true.
Yeah. See, I got this prompt and I said to myself, you know what? I could go in the complete opposite direction. So I want to see Telltale doesn't present Schindler's List.
Oh, no. Oh.
Because they've done movies. They've done movies at Jurassic Park.
There is no win. There is no winning. Everybody loses.
I'm just imagining a little note in the corner. The Fuhrer will remember that.
Oh.
All
Do
right,
you
Connor.
want to sell this watch? Because Schindler will. Remember that.
Schindler will remember that.
Yeah. Connor, go ahead. Let's hear what you got.
Thank you. I had a few ideas. Like I said before, like Telltale's done movies before, and they, to some moderate success. Back to the Future, Jurassic Park are both big ones for them.
Mm-hmm.
I had a few ideas for like what Telltale should not present. I'm actually gonna go with a book. I'm gonna say if they were gonna take a book. I know they've done comics with Wolf Among Us, but I'm gonna say Telltale doesn't present Paradise Lost.
Actually, that might work.
I don't know.
That could be incredible.
I thought you were gonna say Where the Red Fern Grows.
How about this? Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
That was my first thought, but I thought Paradise Lost confused me very much. In the knowledge of, like,
Yeah.
I don't know if even Telltale could fix that
I don't know.
fever dream of a metaphor.
Maybe they'd make it, and then we would all understand Paradise Lost.
My
Not
God.
much more.
Or
I
Tell-
could get a literature degree.
Either that or the myth of Sisyphus. Telltale does not present the myth of Sisyphus.
There you go.
I think then after that, everybody on the Telltale development staff gets a literature degree.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
I imagine a lot of them probably already do.
Yeah.
What about you, Grant?
Mine, I wouldn't necessarily make a bad game in and of itself, but the internet would ruin it. Telltale presents Shrek.
That'd be amazing.
I just don't want to see that. I don't want to see Telltale presents Shrek.
No.
Shrek is love. Shrek is life.
Never let the modding community get their hands on that.
Alright, and I am going to add on a bit of a somber note. This is true, people. Telltale does not present Sam & Max Season 4. Thank you. Good night.
Oh, you made me sad. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us for episode 2 of Volcano Bakemeat. Feel free again to visit us on social media. Twitter, we are at So Simply Very Good. Good spelled G-U-D because G-O-O-D was taken. Damn it. Facebook.com. We are Volcano Bakemeat there as well. You can also visit us at volcanobakemeat.wordpress.com for blog posts, further information, maybe even some show notes.
And while you're on WordPress, social media, what have you, definitely please leave us some comments as to what your favorite games are or with solid stories, what doesn't have a good story that you think we should avoid at all costs. Just talk with us. We like it.
We're lonely.
Jeff's lonely.
I'm very lonely.
And with that, we will see you on the next episode of Volcano Bakemeat. So simply, very good.